Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail is sitting at a recent review score of mostly negative on Steam and a mixed all review score, but it's not quite that simple. Warning, this video will have context. A vitriolic internet discord's greatest kryptonite. Hello everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming, and yeah, we're talking about Dawntrail again and community reception to it. Safe to say, people generally are quite vocal about their disdain and dislike for the latest expansion to Final Fantasy XIV entitled Dawntrail. But there's always a funny little quirk when it comes to these internet discussions, and it's always, well, is it actually representative of general community sentiment, or is it just a loud vocal minority being really loud about something? And there's some pieces of data that I've become aware of recently that I wanted to talk about today. And it's largely what I just talked about at the beginning of this video. Steam is the largest storefront for PC gaming. It is not the only place that people play Final Fantasy XIV. There are sizable contingents of players, both on the console side of things, but also on PC that don't use Steam, because Final Fantasy XIV is available in its own launcher, which is how I play Final Fantasy XIV. But generally speaking, when it comes to internet discussions surrounding games, Steam numbers are used because Steam is such a big portion of player bases overall. And people tend to underestimate just how big Steam actually is. And we have seen games make changes largely because of Steam review scores. Think about it logically. If I am a new player and I'm going to go play the game and check it out, one of the first things I'm going to see when I go to buy the game is those review scores. And maybe it colors my perception and makes me doubt what would have been an immediate purchase, or just me checking the game out, and it leaves a negative taste in the mouth. Companies generally don't like that sort of thing. If you want an example of a similar case like this happening, look no further than Helldivers 2, back when Sony tried to forcefully implement PlayStation Network onto the Steam version. Got a lot of people upset, and Steam reviews plummeted, and became a whole thing until it was eventually rectified. It's impossible to say that Steam reviews were the only factor in that regard, but normally I tend to find Steam reviews and similar metrics like that to be indicative of a larger trend going on. But it's also data that is very visible to the average person. You don't need a lot of information or a lot of knowledge to look at mostly negative on Steam and go, something's wrong here. Why are so many people being negative about this? Am I missing something? But I did talk about context, because this isn't another video that's on the internet just to hate on Dawntrail religiously, right? It's not like that, because I think this entire discussion, or what I imagine will become a discussion, lacks a few pieces of information. People will either try to completely write this off as meaningless data that doesn't amount to much, or they'll try to hoist it up as an example of every sin that Dawntrail has apparently committed, and that the game is dying quickly. I don't think either case is really accurate in this current scenario. One, let's talk about the mostly negative Steam review score right now. You can look at Steam, and there's a number right next to mostly negative that some of you probably looked at, have been screaming at the top of your lungs, Jmulls, look at it, it's only 147 recent reviews. For a game with about 1 million players right now, probably, that is not much. And yeah, it is not much. Same thing with all reviews being mixed at only 4,500 reviews. That is not that many people in the grand scheme of things. It's a data subset that, in my opinion, is too small to really gather much actionable information from. But what we can gather here is that people at least were energized enough to leave these reviews instead of positive ones. And I understand that on the internet it can be perceived that negativity drives a lot of conversation, can be a massive motivating factor for a lot of people, and I get that, I understand it. At the same time, the end result is still that mostly negative recent review score for Steam page of Dawntrail and mixed overall. While the number of reviews is small, the effect is still the same for a lot of people. But I did say this isn't a video meant to crap on Dawntrail or anything like that. I've been talking about religiously here since Dawntrail came out about its various issues after all, but I want to be realistic here. Because if you go on over to the actual Final Fantasy XIV page on Steam, the main one, it paints a completely different picture, where the recent review score is mostly positive with 410 reviews, while the all review score is very positive with over 72,000 reviews, specifically 72,289. And chances are, if you're going to get into the game, you're going to either do the free trial, which you don't have to go to the Dawntrail page for, or you'll just buy either the starter edition or the complete edition, and unless you hover your cursor over Dawntrail specifically, you won't even see the mixed review, let alone the mostly negative one. So it's not like everything is doom and gloom. And there's another factor at play here. There was another financial report from Square Enix, and while I don't speak financialese, PC Gamer wrote up an article about it to summarize it and its contents. I'll leave a link in the description down below to it, but here's a few choice little blurbs from it. It's been confirmed for a while that Final Fantasy XIV, which reached its 10th year recently, has been a load-bearing game for Square Enix's balance sheets. This was then confirmed again when a report for the first half of the fiscal year ending in March 2025, the post-Dawntrail Times, said that it was still doing that, forming part of an MMO segment that raked in 13.1 billion yen, about $86 million for the company, while its HD game segment lost at 1.2 billion yen or 7.8 million. The article goes on to talk about how it's a consolidated result, so we don't actually have specific numbers, but, to quote the article again, which I think is actually just quoting Square Enix here, in the MMO massively multiplayer online game subsegment, net sales and operating income rose compared with the same period of the previous fiscal year on the launch of Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail, the latest expansion pack for Final Fantasy XIV. For reference, that full fiscal year's report saw the segment pulling in 19.3 billion yen, approximately $126 million in operating income, and 47.3 billion yen, around $310 million in net sales, so Dawntrail's making more than that. What I'm trying to say is I don't think Dawntrail is some absolutely massive success, but I don't think it's an unrestricted, absolute, diabolical, bottoming out failure, anything like that. The game's not collapsing, but what I think should be noted here is the trend, because this isn't meant to be a positive video either. It's meant to be what, in my eyes, is realistic. That right now, this whole conversation that Dawntrail is going to go and make Square Enix go bankrupt or anything like that, and all these giant, over-the-top, exaggerated Duma ideas that we see everywhere, probably not happening. And I've talked about in the past two distinct ideas, toxic positivity and toxic negativity. I don't think either is really apt for this situation, and trying to hand wave all the problems that Dawntrail clearly has for a lot of people, I don't think is doing any justice for the game either, because Steam, we actually get numbers for. We can use things like SteamDB, link in the description down below, to look at the charts of concurrent players for Final Fantasy XIV. And again, it's important to bear in mind that not everyone plays Final Fantasy XIV using Steam, but Steam is generally a good indicator of overall trends. And if you look at the numbers on SteamDB, you can see the game really spiking with the release of Endwalk and leading up to it, and then declining, but then also spiking to a near same peak with Dawntrail, and then experiencing a similar decline that Endwalker had, but with a smaller follow-up peak. It's not doom and gloom, but if you look at the trend of the graph, it's going down, at least since Endwalker, generally speaking. It's not like it's a free fall into nothingness or anything like that, but it's a trend that I don't think Final Fantasy XIV should have. Dawntrail has real systemic issues, and issues that have been underneath the surface for Final Fantasy XIV for the longest time that are starting to bubble. I think they are absolutely addressable and fixable and solvable. 7.2 is seemingly bringing the content. The big kick in the teeth in regards to that, though, is that stuff like a Cold Crescent or Cosmic Exploration, I don't know this for certain, but chances are they'll probably come out in 7.25, which is more months away away from the release of 7.2. But when that content is actually here, it could be really good. Sure, it may be samey or similar to content we've had before, but it is content to feed a starving player base that wants more to chew on and to bite and to sink their teeth into and gnaw on for a period of time. Ishgard Restoration was generally well liked. Same thing with Bosja. If these pieces of content can be similar to that, but better, and then be iterated on throughout the remainder of Dawntrail, alongside bringing things online like a deep dungeon and a new Criterion dungeon, and if overall fight design can be as fun as it has been in Dawntrail, at least for me so far, I think Dawntrail and overall reception to it will start to soften, as I've talked about before. So I don't think the modus operandi for a lot of players should be strictly negative or strictly positive. It should be realistic. I don't think Final Fantasy XIV is dying or anything like that. I think that's an exaggeration that comes from personal bitterness from a lot of people than actual data and realism. Are people upset? Absolutely, and you would have to be blind not to see it. And are people upset rightfully so? I'd argue yes, because I don't think the state of the game is inherently healthy or anything like that. But I do think it's salvageable, and I don't think it would require a completely new game or an overhaul or anything like that. It just requires a change in philosophy. Releasing this content early in an expansion's life cycle from 8.0 and beyond, sticking the landing with the content still to come in Dawntrail, and making sure it's good, and then taking feedback into account when it comes to the story and storytelling going into the future. May not be an immediate fix, but it is a fix that can happen at some point. I am never an advocate that a game is fully dead and can never come back, because if a game is good and people want to play it, they'll come back. Reception and perception surrounding the game right now might be negative, but it's not like it's an unwinnable situation for Square Enix or anything like that. If you have constructive feedback, it is important to voice that. And if you don't believe you're getting the value for your subscription, it's okay to leave the game. And if the game looks good later on, come back. Be a smart consumer. Don't be a mindless drone. Someone that gets swept up in the tide of internet discourse that's trying to make you pick a side, either defend your corporation or just be a giant troll that comes into every discussion to spread negativity and to ruin other people's fun. I don't like either side of that aisle, but I get why people have strong reactions and strong impulses when it comes to games like this. Because I've seen it before with World of Warcraft. You dedicate so much time and energy and money into an experience. If you become disappointed and disillusioned with the state of the game, it hurts. Because you have so much investment in a multitude of avenues with that game. Like, just to get to Dawntrail, and I've hammered this home a bunch of times before, to get to Dawntrail, to not like the story of Dawntrail, unless you buy a boost, which I just don't think a lot of people do, you have to go through hundreds and hundreds of hours of a JRPG story. I'm sorry, but if you make it that far, you like the game. Or you have like superhuman levels of stubbornness. And when you have that much investment into a product, and then something is delivered that to you is disappointing and disillusions you with the future of the game, of course you're going to get upset. Of course you're going to be disappointed. You may even be angry. But it's important to be a smart consumer at the end of it all, and not to let emotion cloud your better judgment. Is the game perfect right now? No, far from it. Is it dying tomorrow? No, far from it. Can this game be salvaged? Yes. Can they make job design better in the future? They could. Do you have a right to be pessimistic if they will or not? Yeah, sure. I'm not saying be optimistic or be pessimistic or anything like that. Just be healthy about it. If you like the game and play it. And if you don't like the game, then just stop playing. And then if the game wins you over at some point in the future, then come back and play. Does it suck that you'll probably lose your house in that time? Yes. And it's one of the problems I have with Final Fantasy XIV overall when it comes to housing and acquisition and retention. Game ain't perfect, but it's not down the drain either. And with that, I'll call the video there for today. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure making the video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It'd really help the channel out and help help support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, go play some video games. Let me know, by the way, what was your favorite element to Final Fantasy XIV, and if it still is your favorite element, but also what you don't like about the state of the game right now. It could be one thing, two things, let me know. I'd love to hear you yap. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Go play some games, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.